Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Dark Screams, Volume 5, edited by Brian James Freeman and Richard Chismer, narrated by Joe Barrett. Everything You've Always Wanted. Mick Garris. It had been a long time since I'd flown first class, and I must admit that I'd missed it. But here I was, winging across a vast, arid flyover America, bound for the bustling metropolis that was Indianapolis, wondering which came first in the English lexicon, metropolis or Indianapolis. Surely the former. I'd have to remember to Google it when I was back within internet range. I'd never been to Indianapolis before, and for that matter, don't think I know anyone who has. Is there a reason to visit there? Other than as a special guest at the annual Monsterthon convention, of course, which was the crown of thorns I wore this particular moribund weekend. Leaving L.A. before the landlord came sniffing around for his filthy lucre was always a good idea, and to have travel and accommodations paid for, and in first class no less, by a third party, put the emphasis on the party. Some time ago, I had made a little independent film, one that maybe even you have heard of. Let me virtually buff my fingernails on my shirt and let them gleam in the sin of pride. Taxed was one of those exceedingly rare little horror thrillers that could have happened only before the end of the 20th century. It cost about $400,000, was filmed with an unknown cast in Florida, got picked up and released on 500 screens by New Century Millennial, and somehow earned a box office gross of more than $12 million. Well, that's $12 million that New Century Millennial would admit to, so I'd bet you could add at least 50% and be closer to the actual gross. Taxed was crude, I'll admit it, but that worked for the story, which was a hillbilly horror tale of rural cannibals who excelled at human taxidermy, and it owed huge debts to Tobe Hooper, Alfred Hitchcock, and Wes Craven, the movie, not the cannibals, though I suppose they did too. But I think it was the Shakespeare references that I had injected and expounded on in every interview that gave it an air of respectability in the mainstream press. Of course, the horror genre, particularly at that time, has always been a gutter in the eyes of the tastemakers in America. But if you can bandy about Lady Macbeth and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern as well as Dali and Gaudí, and at least have a passing knowledge of a cultural past, the pretenders of critical mass will take in your bullshit and look for deeper meaning and embrace your little cinematic masterpiece and give it attention. The Taxed reviews weren't all good, but the fact that it was taken seriously enough to review at all was quite an accomplishment. So our audience went beyond the bloodthirsty Gorehound Fangoria subscribers and the multiplex sub-basement and into the art house sensibility as well. We had that rare crossover horror hit. Well, if you can call $12 million a hit, and New Century Millennial did, repeatedly. It did even better on video. Of course, that was a non-union film, ergo, though I wrote and directed this masterpiece, it was before I joined the Writers and Directors Guilds, so the distributors did not share any of that pie with me. No residuals, no profits, no guts, no glory. Well, maybe a little bit of the latter too, but not so much. Not until now, anyway, at the Monsterthon salute to the 25th anniversary of Taxed in the teeming cosmopolis of Indianapolis, a city better flown over than visited, I was soon to learn. But Indianapolis was still a couple hours away, as I stared down at the grids of lackluster brown ranch land between cities below me. I sipped a Dewar's as the ice clanked against my new crown, sending a jolt of freezer burn up into my jaw. My iPad had run out of juice, so I had to flip through the airline magazine to pass the time. I'd hoped the drinks would knock me out, but I just can't sleep on a plane. Hell, I can't sleep in a bed most of the time. So I was stuck in 3C next to an enormous guy in a Sears salesman suit with a deviated septum and sleep apnea, snorting like a water buffalo as he jolted in and out of sleep with each trumpeting phlegmatic blap, trying to find entertainment in a publication that is all about cramming the space between the ads with inoffensive filler. The cabin suddenly filled with an acrid aroma, and I looked around to see that 2-ton Willie Loman had wet himself in his sleep. Ah, first-class luxury. All I could do was sit back, hold my breath, and take stock of what had brought me here. Taxed was a big success, and it did open a lot of doors for me. I was the flavor of the month, which was pretty exciting for a 25-year-old filmmaker from the wrong coast of Florida. The film had been embraced and toasted, and doors were flung wide in welcome to me at all the studios and agencies. I pitched and schmoozed and partied and did all the things you're supposed to do, and it worked. I signed with CAA, directed an episode of Tales from the Crypt, and made my first Hollywood studio deal with Joel Silver, which was a horror story in itself. The rude truth I discovered is that Hollywood hates horror, doesn't understand it, is embarrassed by it, but likes to tell you how it's done. So I went from this little movie made with friends and family, on a budget cobbled together by Tampa lawyers, doctors, and would-be actors' dads and uncles, to a $35 million Warner's budget. In this case, you could probably lop off half of that and be closer to the truth, and international movie stars. Well, international names. You've heard of them, but you wouldn't go see them in a movie just because they were in it. And the fact is, you didn't. Now, with the studio and press expectations, the tarted-up, spangly, big-budget would-be masterpiece was swept out of the Cineplex Odeon with the spilled popcorn and jujubes before its opening week even ended. When Gigantic tanked, and despite all of the studio meddling and star tantrums and ratings board bullshit and shitty release date and stupid marketing campaign, I have only myself to blame. CAA no longer returned my calls, leaving me to guess that I'd been dropped as a client. A quarter-century later, I've never talked to anyone over there since. It is still only conjecture that I am no longer represented by them. Open doors slammed in my face, backs turned on me, and I moved from my West Hollywood condominium to a third-floor apartment in an 80-year-old Koreatown building that was, in its heyday, architecturally beautiful. That day, however, was decades before it was peopled by hopeful hipsters in pork pie hats cruising hallways dank with the smell of kimchi. So no, the answer to your unasked question is that I haven't made a movie since. However, New Century Millennial collapsed in a mountain of lawsuits and prison time, and somehow ownership of Taxed ended up in my hands. I have made my living on it ever since, licensing it around the world for video and television. It's been up and down, but it seems that financially at least, that cow's golden teat has been milked dry and is about to heave its final breath, to mix my metaphors. The wolf is at the door. As I stared over the mountain of unconscious salesmen and through the plexiglass window on the faint curvature of the empty planet beneath me, I realized I wouldn't mind if the plane suddenly lost all power and plummeted into the fields of grain below. What difference would it make? It's not that I have any particular death wish. I just felt empty, that every really great thing that was going to happen in my life had already taken place, that my existence had petered out anyway, that I was just wasting time and taking up space. I was broke, lonely, sitting in the stink of salesman piss, on my way to a celebration of the one success I had had in my life, a grotty little gore-fest notorious for its explicit gustatory cannibalism and hillbilly necrophilia. I will certainly never reach that high again. So it's not that I'm angry or resentful or even particularly depressed. I just look down at the land below, and it seems to be begging to embrace my fall. I can see myself plummeting through the sky, tearing holes in clouds, and planting myself in alfalfa or corn or soybeans or whatever the fuck they're growing down there. The amber waves of grain sing like the sirens of yore, coaxing me in the 777 into a free fall and the end credits to a life half-lived. Ennui settles over me in a funk of doers and fat man pee. It's not like I wouldn't be screaming like a girl with everyone else on board should the flight take a header. I'm not that somnambulant about everything. It's just that if it were all to end right here, that would be fine with me. I would not be missed. I would not be eulogized. I would not leave a hole in the cosmos. My departure would cause nary a ripple in the chronosynclastic infundibulum. At most, I'd like to think that some of the attendees in Indianapolis would ask for a refund. Am I afraid of dying? Sure, but not so much of death itself. Taxed was a long time ago. Who am I now? Someone with a fleeting success in my past, and a present that looks like a rapidly approaching brick wall. Maybe there's a tunnel with a light at the end, or maybe that tunnel was just painted on the brick wall, like in the Roadrunner cartoons. So here I am, taxiing into Indianapolis International Airport, perennially single. No one to call once they announce that we are free to do so. I grab my carry-on and, in the cloud of Porky's eau de urine, scurry off the plane and into, God help me, Indianapolis. I stood waiting in the arrival lounge, and there, holding a sign, my name hand-lettered and misspelled against a Monsterthon background logo, was an eager, pudgy horror fan, barely out of his teens, cultivating a wishful goatee and a more developed vocabulary than you might expect from a kid with the face of the lead cannibal from Taxed tattooed on his flaccid biceps. Actually, that seems to be the norm more than an exception. Horror fans may be social misfits and don't often function well in the outside world, and let's not get into hygiene, but they seem to mostly be of an exceedingly high intellect, even the overwhelming majority who have yet to break their virginity. Terry recognized me immediately and ran up to me with puppy eagerness. "Can I carry that for you, Mr. Tarrington?" he asked, as he reached for the handle of my rolling carry-on. "That's okay," I answered. "I've got it. And call me Jack. Mr. Tarrington is my father, and he's dead." I meant it to be friendly, but Terry Monsterthon blushed crimson to the tips of his generous ears, chastened and embarrassed. "We're all really excited about you coming here, Jack." He tried to say it casually, but couldn't get it to come out that way. "The screening is sold out." Sold out? A 25-year-old low-budget slasher movie sold out? That never even happened when it was in its original run. Must be a tiny convention screening room. "Great," I said, pleased but doubtful. "How many seats?" "I'm not sure, but it's the biggest theater in the Keystone Art." I'm impressed. "So are we, Jack." Wow. Sold out and in the local art house. Cool. I might even get laid. We stepped out into the frigid, melting snow and into the little Ford Fiesta with a cardboard Monsterthon placard in the windshield, and sputtered our way out of the airport, onto the highway, and bare minutes later, up to the Marriott Sheraton Days Inn Ramada Convention Hotel. What was left of the last snowfall was brown and sludgy, and everything looked grim and unappealing, faceless and lacking in personality. I stepped out of Terry's scarab of an automobile and into a dog-shit-colored puddle of slush. Welcome to Indiana. The ticket line for the convention was long, and only a tiny percentage of the attendees were in monster makeup. Some of them recognized me as I made my way to the registration desk. I was approached by wide-eyed fans with foam in the corners of their mouths, all of them bearing battered posters and VHS copies of Taxed in their grubby little mitts. But Terry, my hero, fended them off. "Mr. Tarrington will sign your items at the autograph tables tomorrow, so let's get him checked in and comfortable, okay?" They kept trying to get just one signature here and there, but Terry, bless him, was actually kind of stern with them, and was my cross against the culture vampires. After all, that was part of the deal. They didn't pay me to come here, but aside from picking up travel and accommodations, I would sit at the convention booth and sign my name for money. George Romero and the like earned thousands of dollars a pop at places like this. I hoped to make enough to at least pay for room service. Terry got me checked in, and I was surprised and delighted to see that they actually had me in a suite on the top floor. I had done a couple of these horror conventions before, but they were much less professional and high-end than this one seemed to be. I was shuttled in and out of those like a virus. This one was rolling out the proverbial red carpet. Maybe it's time to finally put out a 25th anniversary edition Blu-ray of Taxed before physical media loses all of its value. I should have thought about that a few years ago. But hell, I might even have a good time here. I usually don't like to stay in the convention hotel, as I like to have a bit of remove from the riffraff. But the quiet hallway of the executive level was hushed, and the suite was, well, sweet. Terry gave me his mobile number, told me to call him if and when I needed him. There was a dinner with the convention celebrities. This is the only crowd on the planet that would think of me as a celebrity, but so be it, at 8 o'clock, which would leave me plenty of time before the midnight opening night gala. Ugh, midnight. Nobody told me about midnight. Oh well, time to throw away the clock and abandon myself to the convention. I truly had nothing better to do, and it would prepare me for tomorrow night's midnight screening. I elevatored up to the room, on a floor that, gratefully, required an executive key, discouraging the hoi polloi from polluting the upper reaches of the hotel. The room itself was much nicer than I ever expected, or deserved, for that matter, with a view of the stark, pointless highway leading into the city proper, the lights of the downtown hub well hidden from here. There was next to no traffic. I lay face down on the lushly inviting pillow-top bed, and when next I opened my eyes, it was dark out, and a puddle of saliva was going sticky onto my face, and the phone was trilling insistently. The room seemed even more grand in the dark, as I was rudely awakened from a dream that was already missed, memories of the present slowly filling my brain like a new quart of oil. I picked up the phone and croaked. "Hi, Jack," the relentlessly cheery voice announced. "It's Terry. Everybody's gathering for dinner at the lobby restaurant, and I thought you might need a wake-up call or something." "Good thinking, Terry. I'll be down in a few minutes." My stomach growled as I hung up, my body welcoming a free meal. All I needed first was a shower. There was no traffic at all on the highway outside. I walked out of the elevator and up to the dining room, where an eager Terry was waiting for me. "Hey, Jack, they've saved a place for you at the head of the table." He'd gone beyond his shyness and spoke entirely in exclamation marks now. He'd quickly and eagerly embraced the concept of addressing me by my first name. Terry ushered me through the restaurant to a table of a dozen or so, tucked discreetly into the back of the room. As I approached, they all stood and applauded, giant smiles eclipsing their moon-shaped Midwestern faces. They were all varying sizes of round, shaped like fruits and vegetables, apples, pears, eggplants, even a warty decorative squash. But their expressions were guileless, welcoming, cheery, and I felt honored. And, truth be told, I did not look out of place among them, closer in physical condition to these high-carb carnivores than to the sleek greyhound bodies that peopled Los Angeles. I had put on weight in the last few years, giving up on physical fitness at around the same time I gave up on everything else. I had a 2-year career, a scrapbook of month-long failed romances, a checkbook balance way up in the double digits, a receding, graying hairline with a scalp that was starting to reflect like a mirror, a newly discovered paunch that obscured my weight on the bathroom scale, and I was about to topple the mystical mountain of 50. So my smile at their welcome was genuine, appreciative, even happy, which is a word I seldom use in self-reference. And when they asked me how I wanted my steak, I said medium rare, with baked and mashed potatoes. I forewent the sparkling water and sipped their wine, ate the 1950s-era neon orange garlic bread, and had a second hot fudge sundae. I took the giant step from parsimonious to indulgent, and it felt good, damn it. My hosts were most generous, but I wondered where the other celebrities were. Here I was including myself as a celebrity, only to the Fangoria crowd, and even among those, only of a certain age. The convention's organizer, Freddie Mazer, 30-ish and actually dressed in a suit, though he looked barely teenaged and ready for his bar mitzvah with his pink cheeks and squeaky voice, proposed a toast to me, thanked me for making my way to Indy to honor them with my presence on this important anniversary of a work of dark cinematic art. Apparently the dozen eaters assembled at this quiet table in the back of the room were the Monsterthon hierarchy, and this special, quiet get-together was a preamble to the soiree that would include all of the other guests at a club downtown at midnight, which was about an hour from now. How time flies when people tell you you're brilliant. So the plan was to meet in the lobby in an hour, and we'd all caravan to the Vogue, a former movie palace turned Indianapolis boîte, where we would get our party shoes shined. Hands were shaking all around, and I was already feeling a bit beery after the hearty Indiana meat and potatoes and wine. I was so stuffed I felt ready to be speared and roasted, with an apple in my mouth. Back to the elevator to the executive level, back into the presidential suite. Jesus, I could get used to this if I didn't know it would never happen again. And into the shower. As I lathered up, I realized that I hadn't been outside in days. I'd gone from my apartment to the garage to my car to the airport garage to the terminal to the plane to the airport to the garage to the Ford Fiesta to the hotel garage to the room to the restaurant and back to the room. Despite the grand, roomy shower, claustrophobia began to give me an unwanted massage. I felt uncomfortably full and queasy, starting to feel a bit dizzy and nauseated. I turned off the hot water and sat down in the tile seat at the edge of the Grecian bath, and my stomach settled as the steam dissipated. That stomach. How and when did it grow like this? It was like some kind of flesh luggage. When I looked down, I couldn't even see my dick. I disgusted myself. I vowed to do something about this when I got back. But I started to regain my equilibrium and finished my shower, washed my hair, shaved, and stepped into my Levi's, Nikes, and a black jacket and tie. The night was young. Well, not so young for me, as I was normally asleep by 11, but with the time change, it was still early. That's what I kept telling myself. Let them fet you, I told myself. How often is this going to happen? Okay, it's not Cannes or Hollywood or even Toronto, but it's a party, and you're the guest of honor. And tomorrow night is a sold-out screening of your magnum opus. Put on your dancing shoes and your party face and enjoy it. This might be your last hurrah. I combed my thinning hair, checked out my full-body reflection in the mirror, and decided I didn't look as bad as I felt. And as the guest of honor, surely there were attractive Midwestern horror fanettes eager to lock elbows with me. We'd see if it went any further than that. If indeed there was such a thing as an attractive female horror fan in Indianapolis. The crowd in the lobby was bustling and thrumming, excitement in the air as fans and guests lapped up against one another in ebbing and flowing waves. I was at sea when Terry came rushing through the crowd to grab my arm. "Come on, the van is waiting for you." Waiting for me? Little old me. Terry was in his formal wear, a seemingly newly minted black gigantic T-shirt. I had one just like it, being eaten by moths somewhere in a box at home. It must be the only other one to survive into the millennium. "Where did you get that?" I asked, and he actually puffed out his chest in pride, bloating the silk-screened monster on the shirt. "eBay? These go for a lot." "Because they're so rare," I offered. "And because they're so cool," he countered. "I love Gigantic, a greatly underrated masterpiece of radiation mutation monsters." "Thanks," I said, though even I could not agree. "Come on, we've got the priority van waiting for you." He took my elbow and guided me through the Midwest monster minions, who cleared a respectful path for me as I made my way through them. The black van was waiting, exhaling steam and pollutants into the brisk night air. My thin blood immediately gave resistance to the frigid winter temperature before I was pulled up by an extended hand into the overheated vehicle. Terry clambered in and yanked the door shut, and we were on our way into town. The proffered hand that had helped me into the van was still holding mine. It was skeletal and liver-spotted, with long, gaily painted nails and bold, exaggerated veins pulsing on the back, practically a talon, with a grip like a wrestler's. I looked up to see the gleaming rictus of a surgically stretched face grinning wildly at me. This creature was obviously female, as she had enormous round breasts climbing out of a scanty silken sequin peekaboo gown that revealed more than anyone would ever want to see of her. Her arms crinkled like crepe paper gift wrap when they bent, at odds with the smooth, immobile skin of her face and breasts. Her poultry neck was crinkly, and her hairline ended about an inch higher than ear level. She was quite monstrously sexualized in her presentation, but as desirable as a camel in a skirt. "Well," she croaked, her breath a cloud of tobacco, garlic, and dead child, "I know who you are." She paused, frozen, obviously waiting for me to say the same thing to her. I think she winked, but I couldn't tell because her eyes never completely closed. I had no idea who this creature might be. "You're the homecoming king tonight, aren't you, darling?" I wanted her to let go of my hand. "I guess that makes me your queen." And she laughed with a sudden violence that made me want my mommy. In a panic, I looked over at Terry for rescue. "Jack Tarrington, you know Matilda Michelson, don't you? The very first green alien woman on Star Trek," Terry enthused. "Oh, it was that kind of a convention. Among other things," the dragon lady rumbled as she leaned in to be kissed on the cheek. Trapped, I obliged with a quick peck and pulled away, perhaps too quickly. I could imagine her unguent-coated cheek sticking to me and tearing away like tracing paper. "I love your work," she told me. "Do you have a new picture coming up?" I squirmed. "Well, I'm always in development." "Well, think about me," she said, the grin still playing in full. Unfortunately, I would think of her, but not in the way she hoped. I would fight to keep her out of my nightmares. I doubted if her mouth could ever be at rest. "I hope we'll get to know each other better over the weekend." And with that, she, whoops, dropped her clutch purse, which just happened to fall between my thighs. She drew it back against my nether parts and gave the boys a squeeze on the way back home. Attempting a sly smile on her forever frozen visage, there was another failed attempt at a wink, her eye rolling up to its full white as the lids refused to meet, and I shuddered, playing dumb, something I've found that I excel at. I pulled my hand away when she relaxed hers, but I don't think she noticed. There were other bodies crowding the van, some bearded filmmaker-looking types, some obvious, forgettably cute last girl actress types who littered the recent horror remakes that fouled the cineplexes of America. I was in the celebrity van, I guess, and I felt more comfortable with and deserving of my special guest treatment. Terry made the rest of the introductions to the director brothers of Ripped Apart 3, Rest in Pieces, the third female lead of Sharkzilla, the graying, humble Chinese director star of a string of 80s kung fu opuses called Nuclear Alligator Man, Nuclear Alligator Woman, and Nuclear Alligator Baby. He didn't speak English, but kept clearing his throat, rolling down the window and spitting out giant wads of phlegm. "Look at me, Ma. I'm a celebrity." At long last, we arrived at the Vogue, and the van regurgitated us and, once evacuated, disappeared into the night. We were paraded to the special entrance, where we were name-checked by a giant Fijian with beer breath and an attitude. "Got your badge?" the giant asked me. "What badge?" I answered. Terry was horrified. "Didn't you get your necklace badge in your welcome envelope?" he asked. "Welcome envelope?" I answered. "He's with the Khan," Terry told Big Chief Wanna-Poo-Poo. "He's the guest of honor." "I'm the guest of honor," I said. "We don't need no stinking badges." "I need to see a badge," the bouncer said, obviously missing the cinema reference. "I'm with the convention," Terry wheedled. "Mr. Tarrington is the guest of honor. He directed Taxed." I flushed crimson. "Yeah, I directed Taxed. Don't hit me." "You made Taxed?" the bouncer said, his eyes lighting up. He lifted his shirt to show me the tattoo of Emily Boyd, the girl who gets raped and eaten in the film, stretched across his man-boobs. You remember her, the blonde. "Fucking awesome movie, dude." A patron of the arts. Who'd have thunk it? "Thank you, sir." He lifted the velvet rope and waved me through, sans badge and everything. "When's the sequel?" "We're working on it," I lied, as I passed into the nightclub. "Have a wonderful night," he said, and we were swallowed up by the evening's festivities. The music was loud and feverish, excusing me from conversations that justified my presence. The club was packed, mostly with the big spending fans who'd paid quite a premium to attend the grand festivities with the stars of the convention, but with an overflow of befuddled proto-clubbing regulars. The room was littered with the decidedly unhip, the great unwashed, and about 10% of them were in costume, oozing stage blood and reeking of latex. Fortunately, the convention crowd mostly mingled, the majority of them wisely resisting the thumping pulse of the music.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?